The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
The Derbyshire DALES series is sponsored by Gainsborough Cycles 01427 617 752. For all your cycling needs, this is your one-stop shop located at 20 Ropery Road, Gainsborough, or online at gainsboroughcycles.com. There's a link in the description. Gainsborough Cycles, ask for Trevor Halstead. Welcome back to the Derbyshire DALES, everybody. I've got a beautiful run of villages for you this week, and we're beginning in a place that's got not just one, but several, in fact, different names. Nobody really knows how to pronounce the name of this one. I've gone with Youlgreave. Youlgreave, Yellow Grove. This week we're in the Derbyshire DALES again, and I've got some absolute gems for you between now and Friday. This one is the largest of the bunch, and its name is Youlgreave, and yes, that is how you pronounce it. Youlgreave lies on a hillside above the valley of the River Bradford. It's located about 2.5 miles away from Bakewell. The name possibly derives from Yellow Grove, which would make a bit of sense. Yellow was the colour of the ore that was mined locally. Lead mining was the main economic activity. With a population well in excess of 1,200 people, Youlgreave is one of the largest villages in the Peak District, but it's also one of the prettiest as well. Any visit to Youlgreave is bound to provide you with a scenic walk. 3 long-distance paths pass through it. These are the alternative Pennine Way, the Limestone Way and the White Peak Way, which means on any given day of the year, ramblers can be seen trekking through the place. The good thing is that Youlgreave has plenty for them to stop and enjoy. There's a shop and no fewer than 3 public houses for a start, so visitors are always well served. Youlgreave also has a hostel, so you can even stay here should you wish to. In the central square is a conduit head, which forms part of a waterworks, one of very few of its kind in the UK no less. Not far from that is Thimble Hall, a building that's officially recognised as the smallest detached house in the world. This was a fun one, but also a lengthy walk up and down some steep inclines. Come with me and let's go exploring in the Derbyshire DALES once again. Starting us off today, we have a drive to a place called Allport. To get to it, we have to descend a steep hill with some mountain-like bends. Allport lies to the east of Youlgreave at the confluence of the River Bradford and the River Lathkill. The village is part of the Haddon estate, which is why it's probably stayed the same over the last century and a half. The name Allport means old town, possibly with market trading connotations. This theory is backed up by where it sits. You see, there are 3 Allports in Derbyshire. All 3 are connected by the line of the Derbyshire Portway, and it's that which gives them their name. In this one, there's an old packhorse bridge which marks part of the original route of the Portway. The oldest house in the hamlet is Monk's Hall. There used to be a pub here too, which was demolished thanks to the construction of a main road which leads to the A6 and towards Buxton. Now, Allport can be described as a peaceful and clean Derbyshire village with a toxic history. Now there's an oxymoronic statement. You see, this was a former lead mining village. In fact, it was among the most important, being as it was a centre for the trade. As such, it was highly polluted. The Allport Mining Company used no less than 6 water pressure engines, as invented by the great engineer Richard Trevithick, to prevent flooding in its mines. There was also a cupola lead smelting works here that was operating at the time. That produced large volumes of unfiltered toxic gases and other pollution. Lead mining ceased in the area in the mid-1800s and lead smelting followed suit in the 1890s. Traces of Allport's heritage remain as testimony to its industrial past. These include relics of the lead smelter, although the crumbling chimneys and flues are overgrown with dense vegetation these days. Our main walk begins and ends at the main sports ground to the east of the village on the road to Allport. Youlgreave has both football and cricket clubs and also has a bowling green. Football-wise, that's played by Youlgreave United Football Club, who were founded in 1886. That makes them one of the oldest clubs in Derbyshire. As for cricket, these playing fields also serve as the home ground for Youlgreave Lodge Cricket Club. They have 3 senior teams. They are a first 11 Saturday team that compete in the Yorkshire and Derbyshire Cricket League, a Sunday 11 team that play friendly matches in and around the region, and a midweek 11 side. Now here's an unusual sporting fact. Mention sport and most people think of football, cricket or maybe rugby. Few, however, think of tug of war. Yet it was often the much maligned game that firmly established Youlgreave in the world spotlight. For 4 glorious years, this village had a team who were national champions. A bit further down the road towards the village centre, we come to the local surgery. This is Youlgreave Medical Centre. The practice is part of the broader Dale Medical Centre, which has been serving the area since 1946. Dale operate 3 sites in Youlgreave, Winster and Dale itself. So if you happen to look on the map of Youlgreave, you might think to yourself, wow, this is a big village. Well, it is a big village in the grand scheme of things here in the Derbyshire Dales, but once you get walking around it, things seem a lot closer together than they do on that map. I don't think this is going to take me very long at all to walk around this place. We will see. Next up, we're heading towards a garage and then onto a school. Directly opposite the end of New Street is Youlgreave Garage. Next up for us to talk about, though, is the local primary school. Education in Youlgreave can be traced back to 1756 when the first school in the village was established. That lasted well over 100 years. Its replacement finally came along in 1868 with new premises being built on a piece of land given by the Duke of Rutland. You are currently looking at that building. The new school was substantially bigger and for the first time Youlgreave had a dedicated infants department. In 1953 the school was divided into 2 separate establishments by the Minister of Education. This created Youlgreave C of E Infant School and Youlgreave C of E Junior School. These days the school is again all one and it's known as Youlgreave All Saints C of E, taking its name from the church just up the road. In 1980 a dining room was added to the school, eliminating the need for children to walk to the George Hotel for their meals. Opposite the school is a former pub that was called the Thornhill Arms. It was renamed 3 times, originally being known as the Marquis of Granby in 1829. It then became the William IV in 1846, and in 1887 it took the name the Thornhill Arms, which it kept until it ceased trading just before World War I. There was a Saxon church in Youlgreave as early as the 8th century, but the building we see today was begun in the early 12th century at the meeting of the roads in the centre of the village. All Saints Church is a Grade 1 listed building. It was restored between 1869 and 1870 by Richard Norman Shaw, a process which saw the roofs completely renewed. A new east window was also inserted into the chancel at the time, designed by the Birmingham pre-Raphaelite artist Edward Burne-Jones. The floor of the chancel was raised and laid with encaustic tiles interspersed with bands of stone. The rest of the church was paved with tiles and new heating was installed too. The organ was moved to the south aisle and the old pews were replaced with oak seating. The restoration cost a total of £5,100. The most notable feature of this church is its 12th century font. It was moved to Youlgreave in the 19th century from the church at Elton. The main round bowl is carved with decorative motifs and it has a second small bowl supported by a salamander corbel. In the chancel are a pair of medieval tombs. The finest is to Thomas Cockayne, who died in 1488 after a fight over a family marriage settlement. Now the tale goes a little something like this. Cockayne was on his way to the church at Polesworth in Warwickshire when he fell out with his friend Thomas Burdett. The two men began to brawl and the fight quickly became a duel. Cockayne would end up with a fatal injury and died. How he suffered the injury is open to debate though. Legend has it that he simply stumbled and fell onto Burdett's sword, although if you believe that, you'll probably believe anything. His tomb is just 3 foot 6 inches long and it's decorated with heraldic shields added in 1873 by his descendants. According to the church guide, the effigy was discovered mouldering away in a barn. The other notable tomb in here is a worn effigy dating back to the 13th century. It's thought to represent a man called Sir John Rossington. So thanks to this rather simplistic map that you can find here in the churchyard, I can show you where we're about to go. As you can see, the church is very much marked on this map, on this corner right here, and we are there, sort of at the bottom of the tower. We're about to head down this road here, and this will take us to the River Bradford, and then we're going to be walking along the River Bradford via this footpath before making our way back up into the village here. And this is a steep hill, I believe. And then it's a simple case of just walking straight down the main street and back to where we started. But there's a lot to cover in this area here. Now we need to head downhill towards the River Bradford, which flows through the valley below the village. This is a vastly residential part of the walk, so let's talk about a famous former resident, Bill Burgess. Although he came from Rotherham, he was the son of a Youlgreave blacksmith. Born in 1872, Burgess was the second person to successfully complete a swim of the English Channel after Matthew Webb. He performed the feat on the 6th of September 1911. It was by no means his first attempt at it. In fact, it was his 16th. I suppose that just goes to show that perseverance really does pay off. It's down to him that the first woman was able to swim the Channel too. In 1926, he coached Gertrude Ederle, who then became the first woman to achieve the feat. He spent most of his life in France and won a bronze medal with the French water polo team at the 1900 Olympics. Where the road meets the River Bradford, it changes its name from Bradford Road to Morston Lane. Morston is a hamlet that lies to the south of Youlgreave. It's not much more than a couple of farms now, but Morston used to have a lead mine, like many other villages and hamlets across the Dales. Morston Mine was opened in 1878, but the extraction of lead from the surrounding hills isn't something that was alien to Youlgreave beforehand. Lead mining has been a thing here since at least Roman times. Mining is what gives Youlgreave its name. It means yellow grove, referring to the ore that was mined locally. Mining was a key source of employment for the local community, especially during the 1930s, and that brings us to what Morston is mainly remembered for. In 1932, there was an accident which saw 5 out of 6 miners killed after an explosion filled their gallery with carbon monoxide. They were working on a ventilation fan. The 6th miner was able to reach the surface and raise the alarm. Although a rescue party of 2 workers and the mine manager attempted to help, they themselves were killed by the fumes. Although Morston Mine was eventually closed, a water supply for the village is still obtained from the site. More on that in a bit. So this is the River Bradford. In medieval times, it was both a source of water for the village and for the area's mills. The Bradford source is on Gratton Moor, and after passing below Youlgreave, it joins the River Lathkill at Allport. In total, it has a length of less than 4 miles, making it one of the shortest in Derbyshire. Its waters are very clear due to the limestone rock over which it flows. Although not very long, it is quite a wide river in places. That's thanks to a series of weirs which encourage white-throated dippers to breed in the ponds they create. The river is one of the best scenic spots in Youlgreave, but there are plenty more. That's to be expected when you consider where the village is located. It stands at an altitude of 600 feet above sea level, perched on the southwestern edge of a carboniferous plateau above the confluence of the Lathkill Dale and Bradford Dale. Because of its scenic location in the Peak District, Youlgreave is a popular destination for hikers, and it's not as if there are no footpaths to use. The Limestone Way passes through Bradford Dale. A number of popular walking paths follow the River Bradford. That's what we're doing now as we make our way to the western end of the village. Well, let me tell you folks, this walk along the Bradford is absolutely beautiful. When the sun's up like this, it just makes it even better. I could sit there all day at that weir and watch the water flow over it, but we still have lots more things to cover. And actually, there are more things to do with water to cover here in Youlgreave. Let's make our way back into the village. Back in civilization again, our next task is to talk about Methodism, because once again the Derbyshire Dales doesn't disappoint when it comes to nonconformist chapels. There were originally 3 Methodist churches in Youlgreave, one each for the Wesleyan Methodists, Primitive Methodists and United Methodists. This was originally a primitive chapel. It was built in 1895. When it was constructed, it replaced an earlier building on Bankside. In a few moments, we'll pass the old Wesleyan Chapel, which is right next to one of Youlgrave's pubs. Youlgreave has 3 public houses. They are the George Hotel, the Bull's Head Hotel and the Farmyard Inn. The latter of those is on your screens now. The Farmyard Inn dates back to at least 1829 when it was opened as an alehouse by the Rowland family. It was originally a farm with a series of outbuildings, hence the name of the inn today. This wonderful village pub has served as a focal point for Youlgreave for many a decade, and it's seen plenty of owners and managers in its time. They include William Walter in the 1890s. Walter's brother, Frederick Kenworthy, kept 2 pubs called the Thornhill Arms and the Bugle. Currently, it's managed by Rick Ellison, owner of several other pubs in the Peak District. Today it continues to be a popular local inn, known for its traditional atmosphere, real ales and food. As well as all that, the pub also hosts the local bowls club. Alongside is the former Wesleyan Methodist Chapel. This was originally built in 1807 and later rebuilt in 1907. It was part of the Bakewell Wesleyan Circuit. This chapel was registered for marriages in 1948 and closed in 1973, and it appears to have never had a graveyard. If it did, the stones have now all been cleared. Now, as well as pubs and old chapels, Youlgreave did have shops at one time. It's still got a couple, but not as many as it used to. Right next door to that old chapel, which you've just seen, is an old grocer's shop. And the reason I know this is an old grocer's shop is because there's a sign there that says the old grocer's shop. Let's continue down the main street. Next up along the street is the Old Hall. This is a Grade 2 listed house which has been the subject of newspaper and magazine articles, postcards, well dressings, and even a model made of cake. Without a doubt, it's one of the finest properties in Youlgreave, and it attracted the attention of building expert Sir Nicholas Pevsner. The history of the building spans at least 5 centuries, but few records seem to have survived. Its position suggests that it may have originally been Youlgrave's manor house. Date-wise, it's believed it was rebuilt in the 17th century and that an earlier form of the building therefore existed. In terms of ownership, the Whittaker family lived here for some 150 years, throughout the time of the Civil War, finally vacating it in 1792. After them, it remained for many decades in the ownership of the Friths and the Hawleys before passing between 9 families in the early years of the 20th century. As the local author and historian Roy Christian commented in an edition of Derbyshire Life in 1967, at Youlgrave Old Hall, one is faced with more tradition and theory than actual fact. You see, there are some popular stories about the hall in local folklore. You can decide for yourself how many of these are true. Legend has it that Oliver Cromwell stayed at the Old Hall and looked out through the Oliver Cromwell window upstairs in the West Wing to check for the approach of cavaliers from Allport. Another tale says the actor James Robertson Justice once fell through one of the floors when he visited the house in the mid-20th century. Supposedly there are tunnels going from the house to Old Hall Farm and south to the River Bradford. And for you ghost lovers out there, you can watch a phantom reenactment of a duel between a cavalier and a roundhead in a room in the East Wing. It's known simply as the Duel Room. Owners going back to at least 1987 have testified that they've never met any ghosts, but that story adds to the historic charm of the house. Now we need to leave the main street briefly because on Holywell Lane is the Village Hall. This is a building that looks like something that belongs in Scandinavia. This rather odd-looking structure used to be a school, but it wasn't used by the children here in Youlgrave. This was originally Middleton School, which closed in 1972. That was despite efforts to keep it open as a school. Ideas included sending buses carrying children from Youlgrave to Middleton to keep its numbers up. Now used for various community events, including village parties, well dressings, and life drawings and upholstery classes, this was at first repurposed as a youth hostel. Now, next door to the Village Hall, there's another building called the Community Room, and on the wall of the Community Room, you'll find the 35 roundels. Now, what are they? Let's find out. There's a little board here which tells you what they are. The 35 roundels. This is to do with the British Association for Modern Mosaics, or BAM for short. The roundels were installed during the 2023 forum held here in the Village Hall in October. These mosaics have come from all over Britain and Europe and show our local fauna and flora. Around 60 delegates came to discuss and share ideas, which included workshops, which this installation was one of them. Please get closer and have a good look. Okay, I will. Let's have a look at the roundels then. And here they are, above the door of the Community Room. Aren't these just beautiful? Absolutely amazing. 35 of them. And every single one is fantastic. Returning to the main street, next we have the third of the 3 Methodist buildings on this route. This is the Wesleyan Reform Chapel, built in 1857 and expanded over the years. Of all the religious buildings in Youlgreave, it was this chapel that was the first in the village to be lit by an electric light. This chapel stands on a piece of land that was donated by William Pole Thornhill of Stanton Hall, a family and a village we already know a lot about. Up Moor Lane we go now towards Peak Feast. This gives us an opportunity to talk about shops. Youlgreave used to have quite a lot of those. It once had a co-op, but that's long gone. However, there are still 3 other local food outlets that are thriving, not least because they're run by enterprising owners. Peak Feast is one of them. It's the village bakery, and it supplies local shops and cafes, as well as selling all manner of homemade cakes, brownies, puddings, pies and tarts. The place has a great little outdoor seating area, which is quite often used by all of those peak ramblers walking through the village on the many public rights of way. On the edge of the main village square is a building that holds a Guinness World Record certificate. This is a lovely little house which goes by the name of Thimble Hall. The record officially recognises the building as the smallest detached house in the world, and the use of the word small is definitely not wrong. It occupies a plot that's just 11 feet 10 inches or 3.61 metres by 10 foot 3 inches or 3.12 metres. In terms of height, it's only 12 foot 2 inches or 3.71 metres. Now, believe it or not, this tiny building once housed a family of 8 people. That was around 100 years ago though, because it was last used as a dwelling in the early 1930s. Can you imagine that though? 8 people crammed into this. That's impressive, given that its rooms are less than 8 feet square. The property made national headlines in 1999 when it was sold at auction for £39,500. It's a Grade 2 listed building and probably Youlgrave's quirkiest. Mind you, in terms of interesting and unusual structures, Thimble Hall has a rival, which you can see from its front door. I don't know about you people, but I can't imagine 8 people living in that house. It's barely big enough for one person, but that apparently is the smallest detached house in the world, Thimble Hall. Now, next to this is Youlgrave's biggest feature. The centre of the village is called Fountain Square, thanks to the presence of this very structure. This is a conduit head which forms part of Youlgrave Waterworks. In a rather unusual setup for a village in the UK, most of the households here get their water from a private water company. At one time, villagers had to endure the daily chore of dragging buckets of water up the steep hill from a local spring to their homes. In the dry summer months, water quantity at the springs was low, and that meant toxins were concentrated within it, causing elevated levels of infant mortality. Because of this, July and August in Youlgrave was traditionally known as fever season. Obtaining clean water was therefore a priority. The answer to the problem came in 1829 when there was a successful campaign to have the spring water piped into the village via this massive conduit head. The pipe connects Youlgrave to Morston Springs near the lead mine that we mentioned earlier, and it pumps fresh spring water into the village, terminating right here. That setup is still in effect today, although now water is also sourced from elsewhere too. That's simply because the supply from Morston can't serve the entire village on its own. The head, or the fountain if you will, can hold 1,500 gallons of water. It was built in 1829 after the waterworks was founded by the Youlgrave Friendly Society for Women. Youlgrave Waterworks has had its issues though. In the 1930s, as new houses were built and older ones were modernised with bathrooms and toilets, water often became short. The 1932 explosion at Morston Mine also caused major issues because it cracked the main underground pipe. In 1949, Morston's supply was joined by springs at Harthill in order to cope with the ever-growing village. A raft of other major improvements followed. Most of the homes in the village could be supplied with local water until there were just too many new houses to cope with. Extra supplies today are purchased from larger water companies. The house next to Thimble Hall used to be the village post office, but alas no longer. These days it's simply a house, a lot bigger than its minuscule neighbour. This building was the Co-op, which we mentioned a moment ago. Not anymore though, despite the fact that the cooperative name can still be seen in its windows. Built in 1887, the old Co-op is now YHA Youlgreave. After the shop closed in 1968, it reopened in 1975 as a youth hostel, making the village more accessible to visitors from around the country. That's the way it's stayed ever since. The hostel remains a popular attraction in the Peak District, offering affordable accommodation and a gateway to exploring the local area. So we've spent a good 10 minutes there just in Fountain Square, and the next job is to make our way between Fountain Square and the church, because there are still some bits and bobs to cover in between. Behind me you can see there's another pub. This is called the Bull's Head Hotel. Let's have a chat about this. This is the Bull's Head Hotel, a historic coaching inn dating back to the 17th century. The Bull's Head served travellers in the area. It's famous for its carved bull's head, a symbol of the village and another possible connection to the Yellow Grove meaning of the name Youlgreave. It was run for a time by old Will Shimwell. He was best known for carving the bull's head, and his daughter married the inventor of self-raising flour, Alexander McDougall. Speaking of famous people, that brings us to a small side street which takes its name from one of the most important women the village of Youlgreave has ever known. This is Hannah Bowman Way. It's named after the woman who led the campaign to have Morstan Springs' water piped to the conduit head in 1829. A local woman, born in 1758, Hannah Bowman established the Women's Friendly Society of Youlgreave as an elderly spinster. Her family were farmers, claiming a lineage back to the Norman Conquest. Her Quaker parents had instilled in her the importance of charity. Since a reliable supply of clean water was a priority for the village, Bowman put two and two together and started a public subscription towards this aim. £100 of the monies raised for the waterworks came from her own pocket. That says something when you consider that John Manners, the 5th Duke of Rutland, only chipped in £50. Skinflint. The waterworks currently extracts 22 million imperial gallons a year and supplies around 500 households and businesses. Thanks to Hannah Bowman, Youlgreave has had a fresh, clean supply of water for almost 200 years. Once it was installed, villagers were charged 6p a day to access it. The benefits to Youlgreave, though, are immense. For example, during the 2018 British Isles cold wave, the water supply was maintained, whilst other Derbyshire villages on the mains lost water. Our last landmark in the village is the third and final pub. This is the George Hotel, which is a traditional Georgian pub. Originally named the Tig of Lead, its present name came into being in around 1870 or 1880, although it was not referred to as a hotel until 1941. Local legend says that the stone steps outside the George Hotel were once used by Dorothy Vernon of Haddon Hall when she secretly met Sir John Manners, before famously eloping with him. It's been family run for over 30 years and remains a local favourite. It features a public bar with leather settees and a dartboard, and a dining area serving home-cooked, locally sourced pub food. The hotel also offers ensuite bedrooms and is a popular spot for walkers exploring the Lathkill Dale and Bradford Dale. I guess there is one final building still to talk about, and that would be the reading room, which is right next door to the George Hotel. But to be honest with you, the only thing I'm really interested in this building is the fact that it's got a parish notice board on the wall, and we haven't put one of these cards on one yet, so we'll do that here. Ideally placed, actually, because the car isn't too far away from here, which means it's good timing. There we go. That's Youlgreave in the books. Also within the boundaries of Youlgreave parish is the deserted medieval village of Conksbury on the southern bank of the River Lathkill. The village was recorded in the Domesday Book as Cratchus Bury. It was one of 7 Berwicks within the royal manor of Bakewell. After establishing Lenton Priory, William Peveril set up Meadow Place as a monastic grange. It was located next to Conksbury. Both Conksbury and Meadow Place became property of the Crown after the dissolution of the monasteries in the 16th century. By 1610, the Cavendish family had purchased the land and it became part of the Devonshire estate. The site of the deserted village is a protected scheduled monument today. There are visible earthwork remains of building platforms and enclosures either side of a road that was 10 metres wide. One of the other remaining medieval features is a bridge over the Lathkill, which was rebuilt in the mid-18th century from limestone rubble. Carrying the road between Bakewell and Youlgreave, the bridge was authorised to collect tolls thanks to the 1758 Turnpike Act. Conksbury Hall is an 18th century gritstone house on the western edge of the site of this medieval village. It was designated as a Grade 2 listed building in 1967. On the same side of the site, Conksbury Farmhouse is also a Grade 2 listed building, dating from 1725. With Youlgreave in the books, it's time to head into the countryside again. The next 2 in this series are very small villages with equally tiny populations. That said, the first one of the 2 will see us visit one of the best known stone circles in Derbyshire, Arbor. Join me there tomorrow to learn about it. Welcome back to the Derbyshire Dales again, everybody. Now, this episode was supposed to start at a stone circle. We've seen plenty of those around the Derbyshire Dales, haven't we? Unfortunately, owing to circumstances beyond my control, I can't film said stone circle, but I can definitely tell you a bit about it. It's called Arbor, which we mentioned in the Money Ash episode. You'll find it in the parish of Middleton and Smerrill. Middleton and Smerrill, Middle Farm. Next up in the Derbyshire Dales, we have the parish of Middleton and Smerrill. This one contains just the one village despite the name. Largely rural except for the village of Middleton by Youlgreave and some isolated farms, Middleton and Smerrill is wholly within the Peak District. It's one of the largest parishes in Derbyshire in terms of area, but among the smallest by way of residents. It shares a border with Gratton, Hartington Middle Quarter, Hartington Nether Quarter, Hartington Town Quarter, Money Ash and Youlgreave. The northern boundary is a road called Long Rake, which is also the name of a now disused mine. The parish is rich in artefacts, including flint fragments and tumuli dating human occupation to between the early Neolithic to late Bronze Ages. The best example of this ancient human activity comes in the form of the Arbor Henge, which was in use in the late Neolithic period. Today, Arbor is a well-known tourist attraction, and we will be looking at it in this episode. In Middleton itself, we'll be checking out a lot more. It has an old chapel which was built by Thomas Bateman, a name that's synonymous with this place. There's also a church which can't be accurately dated, but again we'll put that on the map too. In the middle of the village is a small green and a playground which has a memorial to the crew of a crashed aircraft. All of that is before we've discussed Smerrill, which no longer exists as a village, the vast majority of it being cleared for the site of a monastic grange. Lots to cover then, so let's go and have a look at it all. Well, that was the theory anyway. Now, before we can get to anything remotely village-like, we have to first check out Arborough. Now, as we know, Derbyshire is full of ancient stone circles, and that's what Arborough is. I was planning to go and film this, but unfortunately, that ended up not being possible. When I arrived at the farm where you can find Arborough, I was greeted by one of its owners. It turns out you can visit Arborough if you're willing to pay the £1 entrance fee, which is not a problem. I did pay the £1. The problem is, you're not allowed to do any kind of commercial filming. That's despite the fact that if you search for Arborough on YouTube, you will find several videos of the place, so clearly some people have ignored the signs. Never mind, the rest of this will come to you in pictorial form in this video, because the last thing I want is to have some sort of legal dispute. Arborough is a henge, or perhaps a druidical circle by definition. It's one of 12 ancient monument sites in the parish. The others include Smerrill Village and several tumuli. One of them is all that remains of Fulwood Castle, which is in Middleton Village. The others include Gibb Hill, Kenslow Knoll and Ringham Low. Arborough is in the far west of the parish on Middleton Common. The stones forming the circle are from 6 to 8 feet long and 3 to 4 feet wide. They're unhewn and of varied shapes. The original number of stones is unknown, as many of them have been broken, but there were potentially as many as 35. All of them lie angled towards the centre. The circle is about 150 feet in diameter, and it's surrounded by a vallum and entrenchment with openings or entrances on the north and south sides. Let's drive into Middleton now, and on the way, let's talk industry. Middleton's economic background is a little more varied than most parishes in Derbyshire. To the northeast of the village there was once a water-powered corn mill by the River Bradford, which was in use until the end of the 19th century. Lead mining has always been a major industrial activity here since the 16th century. One notable mine was Long Rake. It was an open cast mine excavated alongside Long Rake Lane beside the parish's northern boundary. It was in operation until well into the 20th century. Lime kiln locations have also been recorded locally, suggesting limestone mining and processing taking place in the vicinity from medieval times until the end of the 19th century. Farming too has always been a mainstay, and it continues to be so today. Given the size of Middleton Parish and the openness of the land here, it's unsurprising that many fields are used for livestock. A number of farms provide holiday accommodation and bed and breakfast facilities now to cater for the many Peak District visitors that visit Middleton year after year. Also today, local business in Middleton includes an upholsterers and a furnishings workshop, some collectors of vintage vehicles, and a cast iron design and fix company. Like I said, it's very varied. Okay, so a little bit of a disappointing start, to be honest with you. There is absolutely nothing online that tells you that there is no commercial photography allowed at Arborough, which I didn't know. But never mind, it doesn't matter, it's been covered and we are on with the village. And this is Middleton. This is Middleton Village, and it's beautiful. It really is. Absolutely stunning little village, this. It's not very big. I'm basically at the sort of southwestern end of it here, and to start with we're going to make our way up to the sort of northeastern corner, so we're going to go across it like this, I suppose. And Castle Farm is the first thing we're heading for. So this is Middleton Village. It's a simple enough little place. Primarily linear with a few radiating lanes, it has a modest collection of landmarks. Most of it is covered by a conservation area which encompasses the immediate environs of Middleton Village, spanning from the Old Hall through the square to Castle Farm. Castle Farm is the first thing we're heading for, but it's a ways away from where we are right now. Let's discuss some history before we reach it, so that we might understand its name. Middleton's history goes back to at least the time of the Romans. A Roman road was laid along what is now the southwest parish boundary during the time of their occupation. During late medieval times, the abbot and monks of Leicester possessed a sizable tract of land immediately southwest of Middleton and had a grange here to which a chapel was attached. In the 13th and 14th centuries, Middleton was owned by the de Herthill dynasty, and it passed from them to the Cockayne family. Middleton was then purchased by Francis Fulwood at the end of the 16th century and sold to his brother Sir George. In 1602, Sir George would build what became known as Middleton or Fulwood Castle, which was to all intents and purposes a fortified manor house. During the English Civil War, it was occupied by his son, Sir Christopher Fulwood, who was a staunch royalist. The castle was attacked by Oliver Cromwell's soldiers in November 1643. Fulwood fled and hid in a cave near a large rock in Bradford Dale. Today it's known locally as Fulwood's Rock. Despite his best attempts to hide, he was found, shot and taken by Parliamentarian troops to Lichfield, where he later died of his injuries. The castle, damaged by the fighting, eventually became derelict and the stones were used for buildings elsewhere, including Castle Farm, which now stands close by. Now, to understand the rest of Middleton Village, we have to talk a little bit about the Bateman family who held Hartington Hall. Middleton was held by a man called Thomas Bateman, who in the 1820s almost single-handedly rebuilt the entire village as it appears today. He would build Middleton Hall in 1815. It was erected in place of an older house which had burned down. He renovated the hall completely with local gritstone between 1824 and 1827. Middleton Hall and the surrounding park was sold by Bateman's estate at the end of the 19th century in lieu of debts and death duties. It was later owned by the Waterhouse family, who were direct relations of the Duke of Marlborough and friends of the English royal family. As is the case with so many other of Derbyshire's lost houses, the present Middleton Hall at the southern end of the village is a replacement. Next we have Middleton Village Hall, one of the buildings that was constructed by Thomas Bateman in the 1820s. As you can probably tell, this originated as a chapel. It's the only communal building in the village today, owing to the fact that the one and only pub to Middleton's name was closed over a century ago. There are 31 listed buildings in Middleton and Smerrill. That number includes a congregational chapel, which is what we're coming to next. No longer a chapel, this was converted to holiday accommodation in the late 1970s and was used more latterly as a private cottage. This was built in 1826 for the Primitive Methodists, again by Thomas Bateman. His grandson laid the foundation stone for this when he was just 4 years of age. He died at the early age of 39 in 1861, but over the course of his relatively short life, he examined around 500 barrows or burial mounds. Several of his finds, such as many Bronze Age artifacts, are now housed at Sheffield City Museum. His book, 10 Years Digging, was published just 2 weeks before he died. He's buried in Middleton. In fact, we're no more than a few yards from his resting place here. He was buried in what's called Bateman's Tomb. The tomb is close to this very chapel, surrounded by iron railings. Atop it is a stone replica of a Bronze Age urn in reference to his interests. So in addition to what I've already told you about Thomas Bateman, there's an information board here right outside his tomb. Let's have a little read of it. It's quite long, but we'll only read the first couple of paragraphs. Thomas Bateman, 1821 to 1861, was a Victorian pioneer of British archaeology. He excavated hundreds of prehistoric barrows, burial mounds, in the Peak District and discovered thousands of precious objects. Using a team of workmen, Bateman could excavate up to 4 barrows a day. His enthusiasm earned him the nickname the Barrow Knight. Bateman was the son of an amateur archaeologist, William Bateman, who died in 1835. Thomas, aged 13, then moved into his grandfather's home at Middleton Hall. He inherited his father's collection of archaeological objects and added to this from his own excavations. He also acquired objects from other archaeologists such as James Ruddock and Samuel Carrington, and collected a great many archaeological and ethnographic objects from around the world. Bateman housed these collections in Lomberdale House near Middleton, built in 1844 from his own design. And there he is, the man himself. Let's move on again as we head for the village centre. Most of what's left now is residential, and aside from the church, the chapel and the village hall, amenities here are almost non-existent. There was once a school in the village at one time, but it closed in around 1895. There was also a village shop, but that closed in the second half of the 20th century. The Bateman Arms pub, named in honour of Thomas, was closed by the Waterhouse family in 1918. It's now a private residence known as Square House. Middleton does pretty well for itself when it comes to local events. Since 1977, it's held an annual well-dressing ceremony which takes place in May or June. The displays remain on view for a week, and to complement them, the village holds an annual market at the weekend of the well-dressing ceremony. In addition, Middleton Rocks is an annual one-day music event featuring several bands. That's held in the centre of the village with food and drink stalls alongside various activities. Now we're at the church. Dedicated to St Michael and All Angels, this building is of an unknown date, but it's thought it was here from around the 16th century onwards. It was originally a chapel of ease to All Saints Church at Youlgreave. It fell into disuse towards the end of the 19th century before being refurbished in 1899. It's been in constant use ever since. So there's a building next to the church that's got a clock on top of it. I don't know whether you can see it in this shot here. The sun's a bit bright and I can't really tell if you can or not. But that has just given the cutest little chime ever. Like it was like a tiny little bell making a noise. Sounded like something you'd hear like maybe like a music box or something like that. Absolutely fantastic. It's the right time as well. It's exactly 10 o'clock in the morning. Now, let's head back into that central square. Because in the central square, there's a little playground, which you can see right here, which at the moment has nobody on it. That's a good thing. There's also a toilet block, which is not something you expect to find in a village this small, but there you go. There's also a memorial over there. Let's check that out next. The centre of the village is known as the square, and as you can see, this is pretty big. It has a small playground on one side, as well as a small RAF memorial. During World War II, on the 21st of January 1944, a Wellington bomber, number BJ652, crashed close to Smerrill Grange. It was carrying 6 Royal Australian Air Force crew members who perished in the aftermath. The memorial was erected close to the playground in 1995. It depicts the bomber and has a bronze plaque with the names of the crew inscribed. The unveiling ceremony was attended by John Deshorn, whose father Frederick was the navigator on the aircraft. He was presented with a fire extinguisher from his father's plane, one of the only relics from the salvage operation. So you remember a few moments ago when we were walking down into the village centre, I mentioned the Bateman Arms and how it's now closed. Well, I found something out about it. The building in question is there. It's this building here, which is now a house. Now apparently, according to this information board, which is right next to the War Memorial Garden, it was closed down for illegally trading on a Sunday. The source I found said it was closed for financial reasons. Well, whether or not they're one and the same thing, I don't know. But for whatever reason, it's now not in business. So we've seen Middleton, so where's Smerrill, you ask? Well, that's a question that can't really be answered, or at least not in any definite way. Little documentation exists about Smerrill other than the fact it was a medieval settlement. It was known to be a grange in 1211 when it was recorded as belonging to the Duchy of Lancaster. It later passed to the monks of Roach Abbey. It appears the settlement was possibly cleared to make way for the grange. By the end of the 19th century, Smerrill Grange comprised one farm owned by the Duke of Rutland, which had been built in the late 16th century. Smerrill also had an industrial role to play in later times. It had a mine that produced umber, which is a mix of iron and manganese oxides. It did so by reusing the workings of an old lead mine close to Smerrill Moor in the south of the parish. Smerrill also had some quarries that mined sandstone in the 20th century for the nearby Frydon Brickworks, based in Hartington Nether Quarter. Time to move on again. Now, if you think this one was small, wait until you see the next one. Tomorrow we're off to a place that I can't really call a village. I can't really call it a hamlet either. It's one of those parishes that would be best described as open countryside. Come back tomorrow and you'll see what I mean. Welcome back to the Derbyshire Dales, everybody. Now, if you ever find yourself in this particular parish, you might, if you're thirsty, be tempted to call in to this place, but don't, because even though it looks like a pub, it is 100% not a pub, and it has never ever been. Instead, this is famous for producing cheese. Welcome to the parish of Gratton. Gratton, great farm. This one's going to be fun. Welcome everyone to a place that's barely even on the map. Take a look at the Derbyshire Dales on most modern maps and you might struggle to locate Gratton. There are two reasons for that. First of all, the place is so small. It's effectively just a cluster of houses that you could theoretically walk through inside 2 minutes. Secondly, and perhaps somewhat more importantly, that cluster of houses is called Dale End. So where then is Gratton? Well, it still exists, but you do have to do a bit of research to learn where it lies. Gratton parish is a stretch of moorland that lies half a mile west of the neighbouring village Elton. If you're travelling across it, you have the grand total of 2 public roads that you can use. One of them links Elton to Middleton, sweeping through Dale End on the way, and the other branches from it and heads north towards Youlgreave. Although you'd likely think there's nothing of any note here, you would be very wrong. Gratton parish has at least 3 talking points, one of which is the house that sits opposite the junction where those 2 roads meet. It might look like an old pub, but don't be fooled. It was only ever a pub when it appeared on TV. The house was instead a cheese factory where a unique, crumbly Stilton-style cheese was once produced. Gratton parish was also a pretty busy place when it came to lead mining. Gratton Moor to the south of Dale End had several lead mines. The moor is notable for another reason too. It's the source of the 4-mile-long River Bradford. So between cheese, lead and rivers, this one's got a few bits. Let's see them. For the most part today, we won't be walking anywhere. Gratton is one of the most sparsely populated settlements in the Dales, and getting across it is best done in the car. You only have 2 roads to use in Gratton parish, and they meet each other roughly at the dead centre of the land area this one covers. One road links Elton to Middleton, and the other runs north to Youlgreave over the River Bradford, which actually begins in this parish. We'll see where in a bit. Let's start by exploring the roads, and as we do, we'll talk a little bit about where Gratton actually is. It's one of the hardest Derbyshire villages to actually locate. In 1154, Gratton was a chapelry of Youlgreave, but the location of the chapel is unknown. The chances are it served what is now a deserted medieval village. Where that village is also not known for sure. Some medieval ridge and furrow can be seen around the parish in places, but absolutely nothing is certain location-wise. Several areas have been suggested for the site of the medieval village, and although it was recorded in the Domesday Book, virtually nothing is known about it. The most likely site for it is believed to be the area around the modern-day Dale End, a hamlet which shares the parish boundary with Elton. However, the fields in the vicinity have mostly been heavily improved, meaning any ancient earthworks have now likely been ploughed away. Another potential site is the present Gratton Grange farm, located on the road north towards Youlgreave. However, that's a lot less likely. How it acquired the suffix Grange is unclear, because no documentation exists to prove that there was ever a medieval monastic grange there. Although the possibility should not be discounted, there are no earthworks around Gratton Grange farm to suggest the village stood there either. Only theories exist as to when and how Gratton became depopulated. The most likely culprit would be the Black Death, but again, nothing's certain. If the Black Death was the issue, historians reckon Gratton might simply have moved. Today, wherever Gratton village may lie, the parish is known for one main reason. Where the 2 public roads meet is what looks like an old pub. However, it's not a pub, nor has it ever been. Alright, so where those 2 roads meet each other, you'll find this building, which is the one we spoke about right at the beginning of this episode. Now, this looks like a pub, as I said in the intro, but don't be fooled. This is not a pub. This instead is famous for producing cheese. After medieval Gratton was abandoned, it eventually reappeared as a scattering of small cattle and sheep farms clustered around a dairy. Even though this area of the Dales was centred mainly around lead mining, Gratton and Elton were exceptions to the rule. Here, sheep farming was king. The trouble was that the price of wool was declining by the end of the 19th century, and so dairy farming became the major agricultural activity, and Elton was perfectly located for it. Oddo House Farm on the western side of Elton ran a huge cattle herd whose milk was sent down the hill to Gratton to be turned into cheese. The dairy specialised in the production of a unique, crumbly, white Derbyshire cheese. It was effectively a cheese that resembled Stilton. Owned by the Stanton estate, Gratton's cheese factory was built in 1885 of local stone quarried out of nearby Anthony Hill. It was run on a cooperative basis by local dairy farmers and was in operation until the end of World War II, when it became no longer financially viable. It lay derelict for many years, but it was soon to have a moment of TV glory, and that's why you might mistake this for an old pub. Some years ago, the building featured as a wayside inn during filming of the TV version of the Malin Streak. That's why there appears to be a pub sign on the outside of the building. Today, the cheese factory, which originally included accommodation for its manager and his family, is now a holiday let, and an excellent one at that. While sheep farming and cheese production may have dominated the local economy, lead mining still had a presence in Gratton. The main area of activity was in and around Gratton Dale to the south and west of Elton. It's unclear when the mines were first worked, but again, there are theories for that. Roman brooches and pins have before now been found in surface workings, most notably at Cowlicker Rake and Hardbeat mines in the mid-19th century. That suggests some very early origins. Later surface workings took place from the 17th century, with underground workings recorded in the early 19th century. Gratton Dale is otherwise part of a site of special scientific interest, well known for its limestone-loving flowering plants and field orchids. There's a reason for that as well. Gratton Dale is effectively a huge chunk of limestone, and people took advantage of that too. The dale contains a well-preserved lime kiln. Locally quarried limestone would be burnt in the dale to create lime for spreading on the fields around the area. Speaking of the fields, it's not uncommon to see llamas grazing around Gratton. They were introduced by a local man after a trip to Patagonia. So now we're in Dale End, which forms the vast majority of the residential properties in Gratton Parish. Dale End probably originated in the 19th century, but it's possible that this is where Gratton moved to when the medieval village moved away from its original position. As such then, Dale End has no ancient history, as you might expect. Having said that, it is notable for one main reason. This little hamlet is where you'll find the source of the River Bradford. The River Bradford rises towards the lower end of Gratton Dale, which is the area to the southwest of Gratton Lane at Dale End. Initially, it's actually called Rowlow Brook and is ephemeral. The point at which water appears in the channel varies with the amount of rainfall. It passes under the road at Dale End and then back again to enter Fish Pond Wood, where there's a large pond, before it curves around to the north. The river is then crossed by the road to Lowfields Farm and continues northwards to reach Middleton by Youlgreave, where it enters another wooded section. There, an underground spring flows into Rowlow Brook, which is usually taken as marking the beginning of the Bradford, although the Environment Agency refer to it all as the river. Once it passes by the remains of Fulwood Castle, it then continues on to Youlgreave, passing through Bradford Dale and on towards Bakewell. Well, as you can probably tell, the Bradford is very dry at the moment. There's not a single spot of water in this channel, but of course it's May, and so because of that it's quite warm, and you know, it's not the sort of time of year to see the source of it, I suppose, but at least you can see what it's like in the drier summer months when there's absolutely no water here at all. It's beautiful when it gets further downstream though, isn't it? You know, when the water is there and it's gushing over that weir in Youlgreave, which we saw on Monday. Absolutely fantastic. I wonder wonder what it's like in the winter months in Gratton. Who knows? Who knows? Right, we are pretty much done with this tiny little hamlet. Told you, not really much to it, but how about that cheese factory, eh? And that's really it for Gratton, but it wouldn't be what it is today without Elton. Come back tomorrow to learn a bit more about Gratton's much bigger neighbour. Hello folks, welcome back to the Derbyshire Dales once again. Now, according to my sources, this village has got a reputation for being quite cold. I can confirm though that today that's not the case because the sun's up, it's shining brightly, and I've got the shorts on. It's quite warm actually, so whoever wrote that must have done so in the winter time. I wonder what this place looks like in the winter time, actually being sited as it is on a hilltop. This is the lovely little village of Elton. Elton Eel Farm. Today in the Dales we come to Elton, a village that sits on a hillside overlooking the Robin Hood Stride rock formation which we saw back in the Harthill episode. It lies on the division between Derbyshire's gritstone and limestone countryside, and as such it has buildings constructed using both of them. It's a popular destination for cyclists and tourists, despite the fact there are no shops here. The nearest is in Winster, just over a mile away, and the nearest major shopping centres are in Bakewell and Matlock. It does have a pub though called the Duke of York, as well as a church, a school, a village hall and a playing field. The Limestone Way passes through Elton too, making this another village where you're likely to see hikers and ramblers on the regular, as well as those Peak District cyclists, particularly at the weekends. At 271 metres above sea level, Elton is less sheltered from the wind than settlements at lower elevations, and it therefore has a reputation for being cold. The highest point in the parish is on Elton Moor. Known as Blake Low, that's 330 metres above sea level and features a trig point from which you can see as far afield as Kinder Scout and Mam Tor. Industrially, Elton was another lead mining village, but as we know from yesterday, it also had a role to play in the production of cheese after the decline of sheep farming in the late 19th century. In all, it's a pretty little village, and our walking route around it is laid out in a neat, elongated circle. So, come with me again through another beautiful Dales village, and let's learn a bit more about the little gem that is Elton. Let's go. This is Elton, one of the lesser known Dales villages in the grand scheme of things, despite the fact that prehistoric travellers would have passed through it using the Derbyshire Portway. Being off all the through roads crossing the limestone uplands of the peak, it's quite easy to ignore Elton, but as a Michelin guide might say, it's well worth the diversion. This was a lead mining village, and most of its residents historically were the lead miners who sought the scant riches from beneath the local fields. Elton has existed in one form or another for at least 5,000 years, but its first official record was in the Domesday Book, where 18 families made their living from farming the upland pastures. Elton's largest farm, Oddo, is to the southwest of the village. That's the farm from which milk, produced by its cattle herd, was turned into cheese at the factory down the hill in Gratton. Today, following the gradual amalgamation of most of the farms in the district, there are now only 5 of them, and they mainly concentrate on milk production. The village took its name from the first recorded farmer, Elfwine, who was better known as Ella. He owned a small farm here in around the 8th or 9th century. The first settlers who followed Ella built farmsteads along Well Street, where there was a small spring. This would eventually join up with what would become Main Street. Gradually, a village of pleasant stone cottages spread along Main Street and Back Lane. 2 short lanes called Stonefoot and Ivy Lane connect those 2 streets together. The vast majority of properties became farm labourers' homes. Many of them combined farming with part-time mining and lived in the roughly triangular-shaped main part of Elton. Most of the houses in and around the centre of Elton date from the 17th and 18th centuries and are probably built on older foundations. Most have been built with locally quarried stone. This is mainly grit stone from Birchover Quarry across the valley. So this is Ivy Lane, which contains a group of terraced cottages. Despite being comparatively modern, they are unique due to the fact they were built during World War II. They weren't for lead miners, these were for agricultural workers who were an essential part of the war effort. At the end of Back Lane, we meet Moor Lane, where there's a few holiday lets. One of them is called Elton Guest House. That makes use of a 17th century farmhouse, which has also seen service in recent years as the village shop, a post office and a cafe. Facing it is Home Dean Farm. Dating from at least the 17th century, it had a fashionable facade added in the 18th century. Okay, so where Moor Lane meets the main road through Elton, you'll find the one and only pub that this place has. Now, the lead miners around here had a few wacky ideas. One of them was that beer was able to somehow help them. Elton only has one pub these days, but there were at least two more in times gone by. The sole survivor today is the Duke of York. Built in the 19th century, the Duke of York is a Grade 2 listed structure. It has an interior that's been unchanged since the 1940s, and that makes the pub a tourist attraction in its own right. The pub, standing across the road from the church, once had some rather odd opening times, but nowadays it's open most evenings and on Sundays too. Pubs in Elton and other surrounding villages were often frequented by lead miners who held the belief, rather ambitiously, that beer cured lead poisoning. Now, I don't believe that theory for 1 minute, but I do know beer can cure a few ailments. Anything can be an excuse to stop for a pint, if you think about it. Next, we're heading to the former Primitive Methodist Chapel, which marks the point where we'll turn around and start to head back to the other end via Main Street. Most of the landmarks in Elton, though, are on this road, so we're not done with this village yet by a long way. The Primitive Chapel was built in 1843, and as a place of worship it lasted almost into the 21st century. It was closed at some point after 1995. On old maps of 1976, it's labelled as Bethel Methodist Church. Now it's a private house. It's not the only religious building in Elton, as we're about to see. So there's another religious building to see in a moment, but I want to draw your attention to this house here you can see behind me, because that is quite notable. It's between the two chapels, the one you've just seen and the one you're about to. There's a blue plaque on the wall underneath that top window there, and that tells you about Alfred Gregory, Everest photographer, 1953. Apparently he lived in that very house. This is the village hall. You can probably tell just by looking at it that this too was a religious building originally. Indeed it was. It was both a Wesleyan chapel and a Sunday school. An old stone tablet on the wall above the porch is inscribed with the words Wesleyan Methodist Chapel and Sunday School 1831. A plaque above that reads Elton Village Hall 1982. So, logically, we can glean from those pieces of information that the chapel closed at some point between those two dates. When that was is unclear, but it was definitely still a chapel at the beginning of the 20th century. Now it's Elton's only communal building. Turning left into Well Street now, we come face to face with the old rectory. Built in 1838, it was the birthplace of the suffragist Rhoda Garrett. Hawthorne Cottage at the bottom of Well Street is thought to stand on the site of the medieval manor house, and if so, it could be one of the oldest houses in Elton. The well that gives the street its name stands outside Hawthorne Cottage. At one time it was the only source of drinking water for the village until it was declared unfit and replaced by piped water. Elton's first water supply dates from 1877 when William Ashmore Sheldon linked a spring near Spout House Cottage in Gratton. Well Street Farm was once an inn until it became a Quaker meeting house for many years. Now, to end this particular part of the walk, we're forming a loop around the street which ends up in the churchyard, or at least that was the theory. Well, I thought it ended up in the churchyard. I thought there was a gate, but as it turns out there isn't. I had to just jump over the wall here outside this bungalow, which wasn't easy because it was quite steep, but nonetheless we are now in the churchyard, as you can see, and the church is just behind those trees. The present church building, which is dedicated to All Saints, dates from the early 1800s, replacing a much older medieval chapel whose spire collapsed in a storm. It's thought that it had been weakened by miners illegally digging too close to its foundations when following a potentially rich vein of lead. There's a curious story that links Elton's church to Youlgreave's, or at least its font. You'll recall we mentioned the font in Monday's episode when we were in Youlgreave. Dating from Saxon times, the font with its attached stoop to hold holy oil was dumped outside the church by workmen when the place was being renovated. Once the new church was ready, no one thought about taking the font back inside, and it slowly began to disappear beneath the wheat. Youlgreave's curate happened to spot the font lying there unappreciated, and so he sought to make use of it. It was moved without due ceremony, and to this day holds pride of place near Youlgreave's door. This didn't please everyone. Whilst Youlgreave's folk were happy about it, Elton's were incensed. After realising their loss, they asked for it to be returned, but they were told in no uncertain terms that it was now Youlgreave's, and there was nothing they could do about it. Their solution was to make a brand new one, a copy made by local masons. It just goes to show the phrase, use it or lose it, applies to just about everything. Well, I guess in the church is as good a place as any to leave a TVI card. I've not yet seen a parish notice board, so we'll do it in here. So yeah, hopefully people will notice this and realise there's a video of Elton on YouTube. To be honest with you, there's quite a bit in this church about the history of the village. There's loads of little information leaflets and things which I walked past on my way into this building. So clearly people know a lot about it already. Well, now, you never know, maybe I found something a little bit more that they didn't know about. Who knows? Next, we have Elton C of E Primary School, which was built in 1862. This is one of the smallest schools in Derbyshire, usually having no more than 30 pupils. Most children taught here go on to Highfield School in Matlock, or sometimes Lady Manners School in Bakewell. In Elton, they're taught in 2 classrooms. In addition, the school also has an overflow room in the attached former schoolmaster's house next door. That's used every day except Thursdays, when instead it becomes a post office. Next up, as we venture back along Main Street towards the start, is the 18th century homestead farm. This was once the home of William Joule. He was a relative of James Prescott Joule, the physicist whose laws determined the relationship between heat and electrical energy. As mentioned previously, the Duke of York is the only remaining pub in Elton these days, but at one time there were 2 more pubs in Elton that could slake all those lead miners' thirsts. These were the Nelson's Arms and the Red Lion, and the latter of those is on your screens now. It may have been erected on the site of an earlier inn, or so it's believed. Records of it go back to 1829 when Thomas Cadman was named as the innkeeper in that year's edition of Glover's Directory. Although its modern address puts it on Ivy Lane, the Red Lion was previously recorded in censuses as being on Town Street, the main artery of the village. Today, we know Town Street as Main Street. In the early 2000s, the old Red Lion was the residence of Dale and Vicky McQueen, and if you wandered past, you might have caught a really nice smell on the air. Emanating from their kitchen window would often be the mouth-watering aroma of oven-fresh gluten-free pies, cakes and other goodies that Vicky was baking. They've since moved to Callander in Dales' native Scotland via the larger kitchen of the Oak Over Arms in Mappleton, where they now occupy their time distilling gin. Okay, we're almost all the way around the village, believe it or not. It's not a very big place, this. Our next landmark is on the corner of Stonefoot. It's this house here. The building on the corner of Stonefoot is Elton Old Hall, which dates from 1668. For many years, it was a popular youth hostel. It was run by a delightful, motherly lady known countrywide as Mrs. Marshall, who always had a friendly welcome. Our final stop on the walk is the sports field. This doubles up as a football pitch and a cricket field, depending on the time of year. The locals know this alternatively as the Jubilee Field because it was created in 1977, the year of Queen Elizabeth II's Silver Jubilee. Its existence is as a result of a village committee raising funds to create a recreational space for the community, and they did a mighty fine job. Elton Cricket Club has a policy that only villagers may join the team. Moderately successful on the whole, the team have finished runners-up in the Longston League and Orme Shield twice. The football team aren't bad either. In 2006, Elton FC rose from Division 8 to Division 4 of the Chesterfield Sunday League, winning the Division 7 title in 2008 and the Hudson Cup in 2007. And that's really it, people. From here, it's just a simple case of trotting back to the car. Now, when I made the Harthill episode, the last time I came into the Dales, I finished off by driving through Elton Village to go back home. And I knew then that this was going to be a beautiful little place to cover. And you know what? I couldn't have picked a better day to do it. Folks, that will do us for the parish of Elton. I have to say that despite being located at such a high elevation and having a reputation for being cold, I didn't feel all that chilly. Mind you, that's probably something to do with the time of year. Let's see how cold it is in the next one. Join me down the road tomorrow for the last in this latest Dales run. Welcome back to the Derbyshire Dales, everybody, for the last time this week, and I think I may have saved the best until last this week. I'm starting in a pretty nondescript area of modern housing, which is called Lee Croft, and the first landmark behind me is actually a doctor's surgery. That is by far and away not the best thing about this little place. A few years ago, when we covered Thanet in Kent, I went to a place called Winster. If you take the M of Minster and turn it upside down, you get this place. This is Winster. Winster, Wine's Thorn Tree. To end this current run through the Dales, today we come to the pretty little village of Winster, which lies about 5 miles away from Matlock and 6 from Bakewell. At an altitude of approximately 820 feet above sea level, this one's got itself a rather lofty perch. The village lies within the Peak District National Park, and the Peak District Boundary Walk runs right through the village. Economically, Winster was a centre for lead mining, and indeed some reckon it might even have been born here in Roman times. The boom in mining in the late 17th century saw the population rise to 2,000 by 1750 and turned the village into a prosperous town, one of the largest in the county. Winster has many listed buildings, the most notable being its impressive market house, which was acquired by the National Trust in 1906. Without a doubt, that's the one landmark that visitors to Winster flock to, but it's not the be-all and end-all. Winster also has several old chapels, a couple of pubs, a shop or two, a village hall known as the Bunton Institute, and the parish church of St John the Baptist. All of those are worth checking out, and on this route we will do just that. Winster is known well for a week-long annual carnival called Winster Wakes. It starts on the first Sunday on or after the 24th of June, which is the patronal day of St John the Baptist. Main Street is closed briefly on the Sunday for the Wakes Parade, and for much of the following Saturday there are stalls and entertainment, including Morris dancing in the street. Well, I won't be doing any of that, but I will be walking these streets. Are you coming with me? Today's walk will start and end at the Doctor's Surgery on Leecroft Road. This is the second of the 3 Darley-Dale branches we've seen now. We saw the first in Youlgreave on Monday. The Leecroft area dates from the 1950s. It was built as an estate of council houses. More new housing was to follow this on nearby Winter Avenue in the 1960s. For the most part, this first section of the route is residential, and that means we can fill in a bit of information as we make our way towards the village centre. Winster is a picturesque village in the southeast of the Peak District. It occupies an upland location that's between 700 and 900 feet above sea level, depending on where you are. The name Winster is first recorded in the Domesday Book as Winstern, which most likely means Wine's Thorn Tree or Wyn's Thorn Tree. Presumably that's after a local landmark. Winster is located in a broad valley where a steep limestone bank to the south meets one of shale and gritstone to the north. This geology gives Winster much of its distinctive character, both in the walled fields with their limestone outcrops and in the mixture of limestone and gritstone from which the houses are built. Lead mining, for which Winster is famous, may have had its origins here in Roman times. They certainly mined it in this part of Derbyshire. It was, though, in the 17th century when the lead mining boom really happened. It saw the population of Winster grow to an astronomical 2,000 people. That was a lot in those days. Winster was less of a village and more like a prosperous town. It was one of the largest settlements in Derbyshire at that time. Lead mining's largest flaw was flooding, which became more of a problem as the workings went ever deeper, and eventually it forced many of the mines to shut down. The last working mine at Mill Close, 2 miles northeast of Winster, employed a large number of local men until it closed in 1938. Roads and trackways also played a large part in Winster's development. The most important was the Derbyshire Portway. Although it doesn't pass through Winster, it ran close by. Salt routes from Cheshire also passed nearby, and the 18th century turnpike road from Nottingham to Newhaven also went through the village. Winster today has a population that's about a quarter of the size of what it was back in the 1750s. Now, few residents work in the village, instead travelling to Bakewell or Matlock. Although there's been a gradual change to Winster's appearance and size, it certainly hasn't declined. Winster is still one of the most lively villages in the area. Let's see what it's got. Now, the one reason above all that many people flock to Winster is to check out this building behind me. You can't really miss it, to be honest with you. It's kind of an odd one out, because most of this village, as you can probably tell, is made of stone. This thing is made of brick. And there's a bit of a debate as to how old this actually is. Let's find out. It's called the Market House. You can't really miss Winster Market House. Entering the village centre, this is one of the first things you're attracted to, almost instantly. The market house is the only substantial brick building here. Grade 2 listed, the building was commissioned by the Lords of the Manor, which from 1570 were Gervase and Anthony Eyre of Newbold Manor. It was designed in a neoclassical style, built in coarse stone and red brick, and it's believed to have been completed in the 16th century. Rather curiously though, that date doesn't add up. Winster wasn't granted the right to hold a market until the following century, and so there's a bit of debate to how old this building actually is. It was originally open on the ground floor so that markets could be held, with an assembly hall on the first floor. The design involved a symmetrical main frontage that faced north onto Main Street. There were short columns supporting stone arches on the ground floor, while the first floor was faced in brick and fenestrated by cross windows with stone surrounds. Ownership of the building was passed down through generations of the Eyre family until Anne Eyre married Clotworthy Skeffington, the first Earl of Masserine, in 1741. The arches were later infilled with coarse stone, probably in the first half of the 19th century, to encourage an alternative use. That's because the sale of agricultural goods, which is what would have taken place here to begin with, declined significantly in the wake of the Great Depression. The building fell vacant and its condition deteriorated rapidly. During the late 19th century, it was acquired by Joseph Greatorex, owner of the Old Bowling Green Inn on East Bank. Greatorex agreed to sell the market house to the National Trust for £50 in 1906. It was the Trust's first ever acquisition in Derbyshire, and didn't they get it for an absolute steal? When they took it on, the first floor assembly room was in a particularly poor condition, but it was soon restored to a design by William Weir, the National Trust's resident architect. He used local labour under the supervision of Henry Rye, who was the architect to Henry Manners, the 8th Duke of Rutland. The assembly room was subsequently fitted out with interpretation panels detailing the history of Winster and, in particular, its importance to the mining industry. Also within the room today, you can find a scale model of the village, purposely constructed as part of the historical exhibition on display to visitors. So if you want to take a perch here inside the market house, you've got two options. You've got a bench, which the camera is currently on at the moment, or you can sit on this. This apparently is a 19th century school desk. There's a little plaque here which tells you a little bit about it. It says 19th century desk from Winster School, donated by Bill Staney, restored for Winster Local History Group in September 2005. Brilliant, you're literally sat on a piece of history. So this is the pub that Joseph Greatorex once owned. Just a few steps away from the market hall is the Old Bowling Green Inn. The Old Bowling Green dates back to 1472, though most of the present building is 18th century. Curiously, the inn walls are 3 feet and 3 inches thick. If you don't know your metric and imperial measurements, that means they're exactly 1 metre thick. That fact poses the following question: was this the first metric pub in Britain? Nowadays, the village is served by 2 pubs. We'll come to the other one in a short while. In times past, Winster's lead miners had, get this, 24 pubs to pick from. That seems like an extraordinarily high number until you consider that it was commonly believed that drinking a large amount of ale was a good way to counteract lead poisoning. Like I said in Elton yesterday, if you believe that, you'll believe anything. Those lead miners knew what they were doing. As the road starts to gently make its way up an incline, an old Wesleyan Reform chapel appears on the right-hand side. This dates back to 1852 and it's part of a continuous terrace of houses. There were 3 Methodist chapels in Winster. This one's definitely not the most attractive, as we'll see shortly. Once beyond the chapel, the road starts to rise sharply uphill and the properties become almost randomly orientated. This area is known as Winster Bank. Most of the cottages which huddle together on this steep hillside were more than likely to have been the modest homes of the poorest lead miners, quarrymen and agricultural workers. They spread out between two steep roads, East Bank and West Bank, and they're linked by a web of narrow pathways. All around Winster Bank there are old mine shafts and grassy mounds, visible leftovers from the days of lead mining. In every sense, Winster Bank can be considered a miner's shantytown. That's a term not often connected with a UK village, but here it definitely makes sense. Well, I'll tell you something, people. If you were a Winster lead miner, you must have been one of the fittest people around, because the hill I've just had to climb up, very, very steep. And yeah, they must have had calf muscles like boulders. Anyway, our next landmark is at the top of one of these hills, and it must have a fantastic view. It's a chapel. Let's check it out. Built in 1823 and extensively enlarged in 1850, Winster's primitive Methodist chapel is perched high on the hillside at the top of Winster Bank. Its position means it's somewhat of an elusive chapel, tucked away as it is on the hillside behind lots of houses. If you didn't know it was there, then you would probably never see it. Situated as it is, it has fantastic views over the Derbyshire countryside. The Primitive Methodist magazine of 1833 contains an account of the reopening of this chapel. After it was enlarged, the service took place on the 19th of August 1832, when the preacher was a W. Close of Hull. It had to be made bigger because the original building was too small to deal with the ever-growing number of residents in Winster. The chapel has a memorial over one of the external doors. It memorialises the Reverend George Booth, whose mortal remains are deposited somewhere near the tablet, but nobody knows where. Now we come to the Miners' Standard, the second of the two pubs. This is a cosy 17th century inn on the edge of the village with views across the valley. The Miners' Standard is an apt name given the proximity of the Winster Bank shantytown. Many of the men who worked in the mines would have come here at the end of a shift. Primarily, Winster's men used to work at Mill Close Mine. It was one of the most productive lead mines in the world and the largest in the Peak District. It was worked for hundreds of years, but in 1938, with no new ore in sight and the price of lead falling, the mine was shut down. The Miners' Standard today has a display of some old mining equipment. Together with the name of the pub, it all ensures that this part of Winster's history will never be forgotten. In the Peak Mining Museum at Matlock Bath, you can find a recreation of a water pressure engine which was discovered in one of the local lead mines. It had originally been built at Colebrookdale in 1819 for the Allport mines near Youlgreave, before being moved to Winster nearly 30 years later. Okay, so what goes up must come down, and now we're making our way back down East Bank. This will take us back into the village again, and the next thing to see is the third of those three chapels. We've still got quite a few other things to see as well. We still need to talk about the church, we still need to talk about the shop and Winster Old Hall, and a few other bits and bobs besides. Completing the trio of chapels, next we have what is, in the opinion of many locals, and myself actually, by far the most attractive of the three Methodist buildings in Winster. Like the smaller Wesleyan Reformed Chapel on East Bank, it has two round arched windows, but also has extra lights on either side, giving it a less Spartan appearance. There was also a blocked window high up in the west end, whilst the pulpit was against the blank east wall. As we mentioned earlier, Winster once had 24 pubs. This next thing is one of the 22, which are no longer in operation. It's called the Old Shoulder of Mutton. First recorded in 1753, the Shoulder of Mutton operated as an inn until 1916, when it closed as a result of the Defence of the Realm Act. For the latter half of the 19th century, it was run by the Bone brothers, firstly by John, and then, upon his death, by Benjamin. It appears that a man named William Heath took it on in 1913. He might well have been the same William Heath who used to run another former Winster pub called the Bull's Head. By trade, he was a tradesman, and did all sorts like glazing, plumbing and painting. The Bull's Head is situated at the bottom of East Bank, not far from the market house. The Old Shoulder of Mutton is currently operating as a bed and breakfast. Their website has a more detailed history, as well as a few photographs of the building. Not far from that former pub is the Village Hall, but this isn't known as the Village Hall. Instead, it has a different title, the Burton Institute. In 1902, a man called Joseph Burton, who was born in Winster in 1832, donated this building to Winster Parish Council in trust for the benefit of the village. He was a provisions merchant in Nottingham at that time. In 1841, at the age of 7, he was living on Market Street in Winster. His father was a blacksmith. 10 years later, he was at Town Street, again in Winster, apprenticed to Henry Taylor, a local grocer and draper. By 1861, Joseph was in Nottingham as a grocer with his own apprentice, Robert Newton. 1 year later, Joseph was married in Nottingham to Annie Ball. A decade later, still in Nottingham, he was employing 12 men. Though he was far away from the village, his affection for Winster was so strong that he called his Nottingham residence Winster House. In 1900, Joseph's business became a limited company. By the time of the 1901 census, 3 of his sons were also provisions merchants. When he died, aged 84 in 1916, the company had 40 shops. Okay, so essentially everything that's left is on the main street through Winster now, including this, the church, which is kind of not on the main street. It's kind of a bit further away from the main street, if you know what I mean, but it's sort of all on the same road. If you look on the map, you'll see what I mean. Anyway, this is next, and we'll talk a bit about this, and also a little bit about the Winster Wakes Festival, which is related to it. Winster's church is dedicated to St John the Baptist. The oldest part of the building is its west tower, built in 1721. The remainder of the church is 19th century and was the result of a rebuilding between 1840 and 1883. St John's contains an unusual font, which is of Norman style, and a stained glass window designed by Edward Burne-Jones. The latter, made by the William Morris Company, was installed in 1883. Though Winster can be proud of its church, it would rather forget one of its former rectors. Named Reverend Britton, he once sold the village hall's piano to make a bit of pocket money. The dedication to St John the Baptist ties in nicely with Winster's Wakes Festival. Lasting a week, it begins on the first Sunday after the 24th of June every year. That day is considered to be the feast day of St John. Winster's Wakes celebration is one of the finest of its kind in Derbyshire. It sees Morris dancers performing in the street, a parade, and a raft of traditional entertainment and street stalls. A procession leads through the village, finishing at the Miners' Standard for refreshment. It consists of 16 dancers, led by a king and queen, both looking dignified and well dressed. A jester prances around them, whilst a witch goes through the motions of sweeping the road before them with a broom. As for the Morris men, Winsters are among one of the oldest troops in the country, with their own dances and folk tunes. At the turn of the 20th century, their tunes were collected by the legendary Cecil Sharp and were rediscovered in the folk revival of the 60s and 70s. In stark contrast to the jumble-like maze of Winster Bank, the High Street is surprisingly grand in comparison. It's closed in by the Market House at one end and the Dower House at the other. A number of the buildings on the High Street, some of which were once shops, date from the heyday of mining. Winster has a ridiculous number of listed buildings, 69 in total. A lot of them can be found along the High Street. No surprise then that the entire village centre has been declared a conservation area in an effort to maintain its architectural heritage. Well, there's no denying that the Market House is the most impressive building here in Winster, but there is another one which should be considered, and we're looking at it right now. Behind those trees there is Winster Hall, which is sometimes known as Winster Old Hall. Let's talk a bit about this. This building is Winster Hall. It's alternatively known as the Old Hall. The building was once the home of the historian and archaeologist Llewellyn Jewett. It's also said to be haunted. It has a very striking exterior, with Tuscan columns flanking the entrance. The original hall was said to have been built between 1628 and 1629 for Francis Moore, a proprietor of several local lead mines. The stone used in the construction is said to have come from the Stancliffe quarries in Darley Dale, being transported on pack horses. The hall was rebuilt by the Moore family in around 1720. It passed by marriage to the Jewess Cokes and then to the Maxwells, by whom it was sold in 1873 to John Joseph Briggs, a well-known naturalist. Until the construction of the vicarage, the hall was occupied by the various incumbents of Winster, notably the Reverends Shirley, Harvey, Dyke and Mason. In 1880, the hall was sold to the Heathcote brothers, who converted it into a hydropathic institution. However, this business was not successful and it was put up for sale in 1882. It was purchased by Captain Tom George Metcalfe in 1883, who owned it until his death in 1890. His widow lived there for a few more years, and the hall was again up for sale in 1896. It was then lived in by William Marsland until 1903, and then his widow until 1926, when it was sold for £750 to a Mr. Butler of Wingfield. In the 1970s, the hall became a hotel. It closed as such in 1999 and reverted to being a private dwelling. Winster once had a plethora of shops. These days, the only one that remains is this, right next to the Market House. It's just a simple everyday shop, but it does double as a post office too. In 2022, this business was honoured royally when it was given the King's Award for Voluntary Service. It was presented to its 40 members of staff who run the shop on a voluntary basis. February 2023 saw a special ceremony where it was presented with a certificate personally signed by the King and a Crystal Award by the Lord Lieutenant of Derbyshire, Colonel John Wilson, OBE. So from here it's a case of heading back towards the doctor's surgery, but Winster still has two other landmarks to see, both of which are a ways away from the village centre. Okay, we've made it back to the doctor's surgery, which means we've made it all the way around Winster. Well, on foot anyway. There are two more things though I would like to highlight here within the village. One of them is the school, the other one is the playing field. They're right next door to each other on the way out of here. On the road out of Winster towards Matlock is the local primary school. The current Winster school was opened in 1866, but the chances are there were others that predated it. School life used to be very different for pupils at this school. There were once separate entrances for the boys and for the girls. Once inside, they sat in rows of tiered desks in the opposite direction to how the classrooms are set out today. There were no school dinners here. Instead, children went home and came back again afterwards. They also had time off for harvest and potato picking. The school used to have a house for the head teacher attached to it. This now houses the administration office and the head teacher's office. The school has a plaque that celebrates its centenary from 1866 to 1966. It was presented to Winster School by Queen Elizabeth II. The school logo was designed by a former pupil. It represents a lead miner's lantern going down a mine shaft. Ideal really, given the lead mining industry's influence on the village. The last last landmark is literally next door to the school. It's the playing field, which features a tennis court and a football pitch. It's not massive, but it rounds this episode off nicely. Well, almost. Now, just before we go, if you search for Winster on Wikipedia, you'll find a story on its page that tells of a fatal duel that took place in the village in the 1820s. As reported in the Times on the 2nd of June 1821, a local surgeon named William Cuddy was courting a girl called Mary, the daughter of the wealthy Brittlebank family of Otto House. In May 1821, one of her brothers, William Brittlebank, tried to end their association by sending Cuddy a letter, challenging him to a duel with pistols. Cuddy refused to reply to the letter, but the following day, 3 of the Brittlebank brothers and a mutual friend named Edmund Spencer arrived in his garden with 2 loaded pistols. After reluctantly accepting one of the weapons, Cuddy went toe-to-toe with William Brittlebank. It was like a scene straight out of an old Wild West movie. The pair walked 15 yards away from each other, turned and fired. 2 shots were heard, but only Cuddy was hit. He died a few hours later. 2 of the Brittlebanks were tried in Derby in August 1821, but were found not guilty of murder. As for William, he fled with a £100 reward on his head. It's thought he went to Australia. So concludes another Derbyshire Dales run, and I reckon those 5 were among the best yet. We still have 60 to visit in the Dales though. It's one of those districts that seems never ending. Having said that, I always enjoy my trips out here, so long may this continue. More Derbyshire on the way soon, but this weekend we're off back into Lincolnshire once again. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.